Last weekend, Captain America Brave New World opened up at the global box office, and it seemed to do okay during its opening weekend. It brought in just under $200 million globally, and a lot of people were saying that that's a fantastic result for this movie. I've even seen some accounts on social media post about this that are saying like it brought in like $200 million on a $180 million budget. The movie's profitable right now. Well, no, that's not really how it works. First of all, a lot of people dispute the $180 million budget that being claimed by some out there. I don't really believe that myself. It seems kind of far fetched that they spent as much on this movie as they spent on Winter Soldier that came out, like 10 years ago and didn't have nearly as many reshoots. But just for the sake of argument, fine, I'll grant that this movie only cost $180 million to make. Now, if that's the case, and that the minimum this would probably need to make around $450 million at the global box office in order to just break even, not be considered a success, because making your money back, making your initial investment back isn't a success for a company like Disney and Marvel. They want to actually make money as opposed to just ending up where they started off at. So, but still, they need to make around $450 million. Now, a roughly $200 million global opening isn't a bad opening for this sort of thing, but that's assuming that the movie has staying power, because a lot of Marvel movies are really front loaded at the theaters, and that people who want to see them go and watch the opening weekend, and then people don't watch it afterwards. What you need to bring in more people who aren't necessarily excited to see it during its opening weekend, or are waiting for good word of mouth in order to actually make this movie a success. And after the opening weekend, we saw a B- cinema score. 80% for audiences on Rotten Tomatoes isn't necessarily the best thing in order to try to get people excited. Now, just to put that into perspective, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, when that came out, or not when it came out, but right now it has an 81% cinema score, and that movie didn't do too well. More on that in a moment. But it's because of all this, it's looking like Captain America Brave New World might actually struggle to become profitable, because according to some projections right now, it's looking like it might have a 70% drop off at the box office during its second weekend, which, if this is true, then I don't see how this movie could end up being profitable. Captain America Brave New World predicted to have 70% drop in second weekend, tracking for one of Marvel's worst box office performances. Yeah, and I think as far as second weekend drops, right now the Marvels, I believe, holds the record for that. Currently followed by Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. A 70% drop off in the second weekend would put Captain America Brave New World somewhere in that ballpark. And if that's the case, then this movie is pretty much done. So it says right here, Captain America Brave New World is on track for one of the steepest second weekend drops in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Projections indicate that the film will plummet 70% in domestic earnings, bringing in just over $30 million in its sophomore frame. If this trajectory holds, its worldwide haul for the second weekend will struggle to surpass $50 million, putting its long-term prospects in jeopardy should the film fail to reach the crucial $400 million global benchmark as it winds down its theatrical window. It will go down as Marvel Studios' biggest misfires and an outright embarrassment for the once unshakable franchise. So this article is saying it needs to hit $400 million. Like I said, it's probably $450 million around that mark in order to become profitable. But again, that's assuming that this movie costs as much as a movie that they made 10 years ago that didn't have the reshoots. If you actually believe that. Personally, I think the $180 million reported budget is probably what they budgeted for this movie when they started. Then when you factor in all the reshoots and other things like that, it probably did balloon the budget. Now, there's some people who try to defend it by saying like the reshoots weren't that extensive or anything like that. But I looked up the time frame for the principal photography on this movie. It was around 3 months or so of principal photography. I think it started in March of 23 when they began that. And if, let's say, they shot all the days during that, it's roughly 90 days of shooting. And people saying like the reshoots weren't that extensive. It was only 22 days of reshoots. But if you actually take that into consideration, that would mean that roughly 25% of this movie was reshoots. And if that's the case, I would say reshooting 25% of your movie would be pretty extensive. I mean, that's just my opinion, but still, I mean, I think 25% of your movie being reshots would constitute being extensive reshoots. So people who are trying to say that it wasn't extensive, I think are being, I don't know, deceptive, maybe just ignorant of the facts here. The projected 70% drop is among the worst declines ever for the MCU, for an MCU film, placing Brave New World in the same company as the Marvels. Had a 78% drop, which that's honestly shocking to me. I knew the Marvels didn't do good, but I didn't know it had such a huge drop off, because I knew the opening weekend for that movie was so bad. I didn't think there was really much room for it to have a huge drop off, but apparently I was mistaken on that one. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania had a 70% drop off. And that's not surprising to me, though, because, well, I mean, not only because I already knew that, but it just kind of makes sense when you think about it, because a lot of people went to see that movie during its opening weekend. People hated the movie, so then it had a huge drop off the second weekend. That's why I say it's a little bit strange for me to see that the Marvels had such a huge drop off, because not a lot of people went to see it during its opening weekend, and even fewer people went to see it during its second weekend. The latter struggled to sustain momentum after its opening weekend, ultimately failing to turn a significant profit, and Brave New World now appears to be headed down a similar path. While high second weekend drop-offs have become more common in the post-pandemic era, the magnitude of this decline signals deeper concerns for the film and the broader MCU brand. And it's something I said, talking about the box office for Captain America Brave New World after it came out, because I was saying there's a potential for it to be profitable, assuming the $180 million budget is accurate with that opening weekend. But what you need is good word of mouth. And I was saying that what's going to be the kicker is kind of the second weekend. If it has a decent hold during its second weekend, then it probably could reach profitability with the budget that's being alleged right now. But I was saying if the drop off is somewhat like 50-55%, I forget exactly what I said, but it was around there, like a 50 to 55% drop off. If it's greater than that, then that's would be a sign that the movie's not going to end up doing well. And it's looking like, according to these projections right now, that's going to be the case for it. Even when excluding the additional day from the President's Day holiday weekend, the film's adjusted 3-day debut of $88 million would still result in a troubling 66% drop. That kind of decline typically indicates weak word of mouth, and that's something that you can see reflected in the audience scores on various sites. I showed you Rotten Tomatoes, I believe Metacritic. I don't have that pulled up, but that's in a similar ballpark. Audiences are pretty much just thinking this movie is okay at best, which that might be fine for people who enjoy Marvel movies, but if you're trying to get in general audiences, that's not really good enough. A lack of repeat viewings or a general loss of audience interest, none of which bode well for the film's overall run. Again, 66% puts it in the lowest of the low MCU company. Perhaps even worse, Brave New World is performing better domestically than internationally. For context, its predecessor, Captain America Civil War, made $1.15 billion worldwide, while The Winter Soldier and The First Avenger crossed $714 million and $370 million respectively. For a mainline Captain America film to underperform so significantly would signal serious brand fatigue, or it could just be the fact that people aren't really interested in watching a Captain America movie without Captain America. And I'm saying that because you look at the stars of this movie and you look at the stars of the first Captain America movie, you really, actually, even the first couple of movies, you really have none of the same people. Well, Anthony Mackie was in Winter Soldier, but that's really the only carryover, because I just went back and rewatched the first Avenger, and yeah, there's none of the same people. It doesn't feel like this is a sequel to that. This is something new entirely, and apparently audiences just aren't really digging it. Now, enough of this right here. I mean, you kind of get the idea. I found these projections over on the numbers right here. I just plotted a couple movies just for reference sake, so you can see the Marvels right here. This is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and I have this pulled up because this is kind of a good benchmark for comparison, but also this needs to make more than what we saw Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania make in order to be profitable, because that was around what people were saying this movie needs to make. I think that had like what was it, like $420 million or something like that it made at the global box office. So if Brave New World is able to make more than that, then you can consider it profitable, uh, or at least assuming you actually believe that $180 million mark. And right now, can't really see it too well, but Captain America Brave New World is right here. So it's performing a little bit worse than Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania, but it's also kind of a little bit more on line with what we saw with Winter Soldier, which would be good for it to actually achieve similar results. So right now, we're just going to have to wait and see what's it going to do. Is it going to follow this trajectory of Winter Soldier, or is it going to follow the trajectory of Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania? If it has this steep second weekend drop, then you could probably see the results end up just below Ant-Man and the Wasp, which would be terrible news for Marvel. But if it actually holds strong a little bit better, then you could see it follow this. And even though the movie wouldn't necessarily be a huge success for the company, it still will be considered a success for them. So we're just going to have to wait and see until this next weekend's over. But like I said before, if it's a greater drop off than 55%, then I would say that that's pretty much the end of it at this point. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think it's going to have a decent hold, or do you think that huge drop off is probably more likely? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.